60 and beyond. 4 deadly meats you must avoid now. 4 epic foods for vitality at 3 a.m. The clock struck 3, and a darkness unlike any other flooded the street. An eerie silence blanketed the neighborhood, broken only by the distant creaking of ancient trees swaying in the wind. It was in this uncanny hour that a little-known fact about food took root: deadly meats lurking in kitchens everywhere, preying on those naive enough to indulge in them. A bone-chilling dread seeped into the bones of even the hardiest souls. There was a reason people around here whispered about the cursed cuts. They said the first fatal bite came unassuming, a juicy morsel of steak, cooked to perfection. But what no one talked about was how the very air thickened with a sense of impending doom. As the midnight feast began, tension coiled like a snake. A tight chest, a lump in the throat. This wasn't any dinner party. The crowd of unsuspecting diners gathered, sharing laughter, sipping wine, and oblivious to the danger lurking on their plates. What was lurking in their meat? Microbes? Toxins? The very idea sent shivers darting down spines. Every bite filled with hidden horrors, and their fates intertwined with the folds of crystal-clear linens. But what if there was another choice? What if amidst the chaos, options for vitality whispered seductively in the shadows? A tantalizing thought slipped into their minds as fingers brushed against vibrant fruits and grains, almost glowing under the faint light. Could these be the keys to surviving beyond 60? Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. The clock's hands crept closer to 3:15, and a sweaty palm gripped a fork, shaking like a leaf in a storm. Then, a blood-curdling scream pierced the air. All chatter fell silent, and wide eyes turned toward the source. The meat had begun to tremble, almost as if alive. Was it the cook's fault or the hauntings of ingredients gone wrong? Panic settled in. Forgetting the dangers on their plates, they were witnessing a mystery that transcended time. As whispers escalated, hearts raced. What would happen next? Would they uncover the secrets, or were they bound to suffer the consequences of their fatal feast? A heavy silence enveloped the room, thick enough to feel. The trembling meat seemed to pulsate, something dark and sinister lurking just beneath its seasoned surface. People were frozen, forks halfway to their mouths, eyes wide with a mixture of horror and disbelief. Then, with a sickening plop, the steak rolled from the platter to the floor. It landed with a soft thud, but it didn't stop there. It began to squirm, almost like a captured worm desperately trying to escape the fate of being a meal. Gasps erupted, followed by the chill of realization this was no ordinary dinner. What the hell? A man in a crisp white shirt shouted, his face paling as he staggered backward. That thing is alive. His words echoed, ricocheting off the walls. The collective tension snapped, panic spilling into the air as diners scrambled away from the table, chairs screeching against the polished floor. Some stumbled, tripping over the legs of their fellow guests, too absorbed in their fear to notice the chaos they were causing. Behind the bar, the cook watched, mouth agape. The meat had been procured from a vendor he trusted, but now uncertainty clawed at him. Were they right? Had he introduced a death sentence to this unsuspecting crowd? Seconds felt like hours as the trembling cuts shifted, writhing in a grotesque dance, fluid and unnatural. Everyone stood, paralyzed, unsure whether to retreat or confront this twisted display of forbidden cuisine. And suddenly, the steak split open, a gout of dark juice spilled forth, a sickening eruption that stained the pristine floor. A scream followed, piercing the thickened air again, but this time, it carried a note of recognition. "It's the cursed cuts," a woman in a red dress gasped, clutching her throat. "They say it's not just the meat. It's something more." The room fell even quieter with her words, as if darkness itself had leaned in to hear. Whispers began to circulate, fueling fear. People exchanged frenzied glances, each questioning their own familiarity with the origins of the meal before them, now morphing into something unholy. Those who eat it, they become a part of it, Another diner mumbled, words laced with desperation. It's a curse. We might be. Before she could finish, the cook lunged forward, grabbing a wine bottle from behind the bar, and hurled it at the writhing meat. It shattered, dousing the creature in a wash of rich red liquid. Instead of silence, it reacted. The steak shivered violently before exploding into a plume of dark, viscous mist that engulfed half the room. Coughing and gasping, the diners stumbled back, choking on the acrid cloud that filled their lungs. Desperation surged as they fled toward the entrance, but the door wouldn't budge. It felt almost alive, resisting their panicked efforts to break free. As the mist settled, vague shapes began to swim within it, shadows contorting grotesquely. There was a feeling that a presence was stirring, something that relished in their fear. "Run!" the cook screamed. "It's not just the meat. It's the curse. We must," but what must they do? Relationships strained and fraying, faith shattered among friends. The walls quivered. Time halted. Would they uncover the truth about the cursed cuts or become its next victims? The darkened haze coalesced around them, leaving them teetering on the edge of reality. What had they awakened with their feasting? As the mist thickened, a deep, guttural laugh echoed through the night, reverberating with an ancient menace. Everything hinged on the choices they made next. Would they embrace the lesson laid before them, or remain entranced by hunger? The clock ticked ominously, and dread thickened like smoke around them. What happened next would decide their fates forever. What lurked behind the shadows, waiting patiently, ready to pounce? The air crackled with tension. Each breath the diners took felt like a struggle against the rising wave of panic. Shadows danced in the corners of the room, flickering like the moments slipping away from them. The cook kept shouting, urging everyone to move, but they stood frozen, lost in their own horror. "Someone help!" a woman cried, her voice shrill, cutting through the thick musk of the mist. It was a plea spiraling into despair. Suddenly, from the indistinct fog, shapes unraveled, twisting into something almost recognizable. Faces, hands, grotesque appendages began to emerge. The diners shivered in unison, realizing they were not alone. The very essence of the cursed meat, its dark magic, seemed to be raising an army right before their eyes. "Get away from me!" shouted a man, swinging his arm wildly at the nearest shadow. It recoiled as if stung, but then stretched outward, pulling toward him. The mist coiled in on itself, revealing more faces from behind the curtain of darkness, men and women frozen in expressions of terror betrayed by their own greed. Was this what awaited them? Were they one bite away from being swallowed up by the curse themselves? Paranoia surged, and audible gasps filled the room, feelings of guilt intermingling and festering as they looked at each other. Had the allure of the meal truly been worth the risk? The cook finally bolted over to the door, pounding on it, his fists shaking with desperation. "We need to leave now." He threw his shoulder into the wood, frustration boiling over. The wood groaned as if it had a heartbeat of its own, but no sooner had he pounded it than the mist morphed, coiling tightly around his legs. He stutter-stepped, falling to the ground as the shadows crawled toward him. "It's taking me," he screamed, voice cracking. A chain reaction erupted. Eyes darted frantically, searching for escape in that chaos. A realization swept across the remaining diners. The curse didn't discriminate. No wealth, no status could save them now. They were all trapped in a twisted game of fate, tied to one another by their mutual craving. "Let us fight it," shouted a man, rage burning in his eyes. "How do we break this? We can't let it consume us. Get the stakes." Another yelled, pointing at the remnants of the cursed meat lying on the floor, still pulsating, still writhing. They needed to confront the monster head-on. With renewed urgency, the diners scuffled back to the bar, grabbing whatever they could find as the murky shapes advanced. A bottle here, a napkin dispenser there, anything that could give them the edge to fight. The cook struggled, pulling himself from the clutches of the darkness as he watched panic take over every face around him. "We have to make a sacrifice," he bellowed, forcing himself to his feet. The diners exchanged horrified glances, their breaths hitching. "What are you? Someone must take a bite," he shouted over the rising whimpers around him. "Only then can we know the truth of it, and perhaps even end this curse." "Are you insane?" someone yelled, but dread coated their voice. They had all thought it, sitting before that cursed dish. bound by fear and desperation. Was there truly a choice left? As silence blanketed the room again, the weight of his words hung heavy. The shadows retreated, as if waiting, biding their time. Whatever struck next carried a morbid promise. The cook drew in a shaky breath. Who will it be? In that moment, everyone stood at the edge of a precipice. Choices now defined their futures, but did they dare step into the abyss waiting to swallow them whole? As gazes fell to the ground where that cursed meat lay still, the question remained. Who among them would take the first fateful bite? Silence stretched out like a taut string, vibrating with the unspoken words of fear and hesitation. The diners glanced frantically at each other, each face reflecting a blend of fear and desperation. The shadows flickered impatiently around them, whispering without words. Their very presence demanded a choice, an action that could either save or doom them. Finally, a woman stepped forward. Her hands trembled as she gripped the table, nails digging into the polished wood. "I'll do it," she stammered, each word falling like a weight into the charged atmosphere. "I'll take a bite." Gasps erupted from the crowd, echoes of disbelief mingling with dread. Had the darkness warped her mind? The cook watched her with wide, pleading eyes, urging her to reconsider, but she remained resolute. The fear of their shared doom was becoming sharper than the knife that now lay before her. "Are you serious?" A man shouted, disbelief rising in his voice. "You don't know what it'll do to you." But she didn't waver. "What choice do we have? This thing will consume us if we do nothing." Anguish laced her voice, each word slicing through the anxiety thick in the air. With a deep sigh, she approached the pulsating mass of meat. It glimmered under the weak light, as if it was alive, soaking in her fear. Her heart raced, and one thought echoed in her mind. This was her moment of truth. She shivered as she picked up the knife, its cool steel contrasting sharply with the heat of her trembling hand. "Wait," shouted the cook, lunging forward. "Let us think about this." But before he could grasp her arm, she leaned closer and, in one desperate movement, cut off a small piece of the cursed meat. Dark juices oozed out as she raised it to her lips, the very air around her thickening with a palpable tension. "Don't do it," a voice cried out, but she was no longer listening. The moment collided with raw instinct, and as she bit into the meat, the gathered shadows flickered violently, swirling around her in a macabre dance. Time slowed. The flavor burst onto her tongue, rich, unsettling, and profoundly strange. She half expected revulsion, but there was a strange seduction that made her eyes widen. Fragments of memories flickered in her mind, faces from her past, moments of regret and longing. "What is happening?" The room trembled. Shadows shifted, reaching for her as well as the others, and the faces that had emerged before now seemed desperate, straining toward her. They twisted in the mist, mouths agape in silent screams and pleading eyes. This was a realization she never expected. The curse didn't just demand a sacrifice. It fed off of their desires and fears, making each diner confront their own demons. "Enough," barked the cook, trying to pull the woman back from the brink, but a burst of energy radiated from her, pushing him away. "What do you see?" he asked, gritting his teeth, fighting the energy that swirled around him. "I don't know," she gasped, eyes wide, caught somewhere between ecstasy and terror. "It's showing me everything." The other diners moved to her side, fear mingling with curiosity. They were drawn to her as the shadows cascaded forward, clinging like a thick fog. "Don't stand there," someone yelled. "We have to back her up. It's not just about her anymore." Now, the air felt electric, charged with anticipation and dread. Could they take any more of this harrowing gamble? Was the curse truly reveal truth, or merely lead them deeper into madness? As the darkness hovered ever closer, shadows began enveloping the cook, tracing up his legs and tightening their grip. "Face your fears," he shouted, the mist wrapping tighter. "We can't be divided now." In that pivotal moment, an unexpected truth ignited in the depths of their hearts. Would they stand together against the darkness, or would fear splinter them apart, each one grasping to survive alone? The shadows lunged, hungry and thick, and the diners braced for what could be the final act of their twisted play. Who among them would plunge into the depths of madness, and who would rise to fight it? As clarity dimmed and shadows encroached, The question echoed who could stand tall, even as they teetered on the edge of becoming lost in the flesh of their own making. The atmosphere thickened, a mix of dread and urgency hanging palpably in the air. The woman, still caught in the grip of the curse, felt it coursing through her veins like a fire, feeding on her fears and illuminating her deepest regrets. The memories were vivid, sharper than ever. Her mother's disappointed gaze, the love she'd lost, moments of weakness she wished she could erase. Suddenly, she stumbled backward, the piece of meat slipping from her fingers and splattering onto the floor. A chilling wail escaped her lips. It's too much," she cried, hands pressed against her temples as she fought to shut out the memories pressing in on her from every side. "Focus," the cook shouted, struggling against the tendrils of shadow that snaked around him. "You can control it." The other diners surged forward, their fear mixing with hers as they tried to pull her back from the brink. "We don't have time," someone shouted. "It's coming for us." The shadows seemed to coalesce, reaching for them with dark fingers, hungry and desperate. They wrapped around one man's legs, pulling him down with a sinister strength. He screamed, eyes wide with terror, as if he were being drawn into some abyss. "Help him," another diner shouted, but their pleas fell flat against the rising tide of darkness. Panic thudded in their hearts as they realized that fear alone would not suffice to keep the shadows at bay. "Everyone," the cook shouted, a sudden clarity blossoming like a flower amidst chaos. "Share your fears. We need to lay bare what we hide. Only by facing this can we combat it." The woman nodded, shivering, but pulled on her courage. "I can't lose control again. I won tea." Her voice quaked, but determination flickered in her eyes. She turned to the trapped diner. "What do you fear?" "I'm afraid of failure. I lost everything when my business tanked." He shouted through clenched teeth, the shadows tightening with every word. "Let it out," another yelled. "We're in this together. Fear is our ally, not our enemy." The cook cried out, pulling his own troubles to light. "I fear I am not strong enough. I'm not prepared to protect you all." The shadows shrieked and thrashed at their feet, but the more they shared, the more the oppressive weight began to lift. The shadows retreated, howling like a pack of wild animals driven away by the light. The woman glanced around. "You see? We can fight this," she urged, feeling the energy surge through her. "We must keep going." Yet, even as they spoke, they could sense a much darker secret lurking beneath the surface of their shared fears. Whispered doubts filled the air, fresh shadows forming a fog around their ankles. They needed to push deeper. They needed the source of this darkness. "What if?" the woman started, looking into the cook's eyes. "What if the meat holds our truths in its form? What if we have to taste it again, not just the fear, but the whole essence of it?" Gasps echoed in the room, and disbelief laced the air. They had dipped their toes into this horrific reality, but was it enough? Their hearts raced with a mix of horror and resolution. "What if it's the only way?" someone murmured, glancing at the pulsating mass on the table, now eerily silent. They edged closer, the shadows pulling back cautiously, sensing their resolve. The risk was monumental. Could they bind the darkness with acceptance of their own truths? As one, they turned toward the meat, the question lingering in the air, coiling like fog around them. Could they risk it all again? The deeper they ventured into the depths of their own darkness, the clearer it became that something profound awaited them. But at what cost? And in that moment, silence fell heavy once more. A moment of reckoning had arrived. They all shifted closer to the table, an unspoken agreement forming among them. Fear hung thick like smoke, but there was something brighter emerging, an ember of courage. The meat pulsed, alive with a dark energy that reflected their collective dread. "What do we do?" someone whispered, trembling, eyes darting to the shadows that still lingered at the walls, waiting for a moment of weakness to strike again. The cook stepped forward, his brow furrowed, determination etched across his rugged face. "We each take a piece. We face what lies within us." He snapped off a chunk from the grotesque mass, holding it up, the smell overpowering. "This is our chance. We consume our fears and fight back as one." The woman glanced around. Each face shuddered with trepidation, but there was also a glimmer of shared understanding. She picked up a fragment, slimy and cold against her palm. "I refuse to let fear own me," she whispered, and took a deep breath, summoning everything she had within her. One by one, they followed suit. Chunks of that cursed meat disappeared into their mouths, a bitter taste combined with the sweet sting of tears. They chewed slowly, the act almost ceremonial, as the shadows circled them tighter, eager to leap. The cook's voice cut through the suffocating silence. Focus on your fears. Let them rise. You must suddenly. The shadows writhed violently. Their anguished wails echoed through the room, a cacophony of despair. The walls seemed to bend under the pressure, as though the very foundation of the restaurant would collapse. A woman shrieked, dropping her piece, hands flying to her throat. I see them. My husband, he never forgave me. I abandoned him in his time of need. Her eyes widened, horror like a tidal wave crashing down. We need support. Keep speaking. The cook rallied them, desperation fueling his voice. The swirling darkness recoiled, but only momentarily. The man who had first shared his fear of failure shouted next. I've always been afraid of not being enough. My family expected me to succeed, and I let them down. Each confession intertwined with the shadows, and the hideous faces of loss and regret became clearer, twisted, snarling, resembling the diner's anguished memories. As the weight of their truths deepened, the air crackled with energy. Shadows began to fragment, light breaking through. Yet another part of the mass erupted, and they felt the icy grip of the dark tendrils wrap their hearts. With shaking hands, the woman took the courage from others' cries and opened her mouth to speak. I fear that my dreams are too big, that I'll never escape this curse, she confessed, her voice shaky but steady. But I choose to breathe. I choose to live. In response, the shadows screamed again, a roar that tasted like bile. They surged back as though struck by an unseen force. The cook yelled above the chorus of sorrow. It's working. Don't stop. We push together. And like a dam breaking, their fears burst into the open. The truth came rushing forth in a torrent. Each harsh confession chipped away at the shadows. Yet so too did darker secrets fester. I took the easy route. A voice cried, abandoning my calling out of convenience. I loathe my best friend for moving on without me. Echoed another, desperation painting their tone. As they shared, the remnants of light continued to flicker, straining against horrible darkness that had no intent of vanishing easily. But then it happened. The meat began to rot in their very hands, decomposition fast and violent. A stench of decay permeated the air, the truth they consumed turning sour, reflecting their confessions and fears. What is happening? Someone gasped, filled with dread as the shadows moved aggressively, trying to reclaim their grounding. The cook's expression hardened. It's the cycle feeding on itself. We're losing the light. The woman gripped her chunk of meat tighter, the taste of iron now washing over her. If it's all consuming us, what happens next? In the fading light, shadows swirled again, forming a giant maw, ready to swallow them whole. Prepare to fight. The cook shouted. The moment drew near. Thick with tension, would they sink or swim? Outside, thunder rolled ominously, a portent of the furious battle about to unfold. And then it hit her, the blinding realization that they might be too far gone. What if facing these horrors was not enough? Would they ever escape? The shadows roared with laughter, an echo of their collective dread as the darkness closed in. The moment had come. The shadows twisted and twirled, hungry for their despair. The taste of decay was in their mouths now, sour and thick as they fought to stay present. The woman felt the weight of that horrid meat growing heavier in her hand, the rotting flesh crumbling under her grip. Don't let it take you. The cook's voice surged like a battle cry, cutting through the noise. Turn that fear into strength. Transform the rotting into rebirth. Her heart raced. She felt the panic creeping up her throat, a tight knot of terror. But she forced herself to remember that shared energy, the ember of courage pooling within. They had all fought against their shadows, and they would not go down without a fight. Let us do this together. Someone yelled, their voice almost lost amid the chaos. But there it was, that sliver of unity breaking through the fear, a tether drawing them closer. They gathered, shoulder to shoulder, chanting their fears like a mantra, speaking them aloud until the words lost their sting. I fear losing my loved ones. I dread becoming forgotten. I fear I'm too weak to rise. Each word echoed louder than the last. With every confession, the shadows screamed, thrashing about. But their cries morphed, from malicious sneers to cries of anguish. The darkness started to tremble, lurching backward as if repelled by their combined voices. The cook's face illuminated by a flicker of light, sweat glistening on his brow as he rallied them further. It's working. Shift your focus. Think of what you can gain instead of what you might lose. Her heart pounded, thrumming against her ribs. What could they gain? Hope. Life. In that moment, she saw flickers of their past. Laughter, love, and dreams once held tightly. Yes, I crave joy. I choose to live fully, she shouted, almost surprised by her own strength. With each declaration, they flicked their attention from despair to hope, from shadows to the crystalline gleam of possibilities. And then the impossible happened. The shadows convulsed, their forms wailing and twisting unnaturally, as if they were being unmade by the power of their words. But the grotesque confrontation was not done. From the depths of the formless darkness, a face emerged, a ghastly reflection of nightmares past. A specter that twisted former loved ones' faces into a grotesque blend of fear and anguish. Do you think you can escape? It hissed, its voice a chilling whisper that cut through the rising chaos. You've just begun to open the door, and you're not prepared for what lies beyond. The air thickened with dread as it reached out toward them, fingers elongated and jagged. They recoiled, the shadows around them swirling with vicious energy. The woman felt cold sweat trickle down her spine. Could they really win against such horror? We must forge on. The cook cried out, rallying strength from the others. In that instant, defiance ignited within her. We are not alone. Together, we rise, she bellowed, each word bolstering the collective spirit. Around her, heads nodded, bodies tensed and ready for the oncoming storm. The shadows lunged, a chaotic mass of fury, clawing at their resolve. But she held her ground, the rotting meat still clutched in her fingers, a visceral reminder of what they faced. Just as the darkness lunged forward, the cook spoke a final word, fight. And then everything erupted. Light crashed against the encroaching dark, a dazzling display of brilliance that set their hearts to racing. But within that brightness lay uncertainty. What would emerge from this fragile dance of light and shadow? As the light flooded the room, bathing them all in luminescence, she felt her heart race with courage and fear. They were on the edge of a precipice, but what lay on the other side? In that fleeting moment of illumination, she caught a glimpse of the truth they would have to confront next. Something darker lurked in the corners of their collective memory, ready to strike again. What have we awakened? She whispered, dread curling tightly around her heart. The shadows screeched, and she knew this battle was just the beginning. The light flickered, casting wild patterns on the walls as the shadows hesitated, recoiling momentarily from the brilliance around them. But it was a fragile truce, a thin veil stretched over an abyss of horror. The woman's resolve was tested as she locked eyes with the specter, the twisted visage of her memories reflecting back at her with palpable malice. What lies beyond? Her voice quivered, almost lost in the chaos. Fear gripped her once more, but she couldn't let it consume her. She bore witness to her friends, their faces twisted with fear, but beneath their terror lay an undeniable thread of courage, binding them together in this hellish dance of light and dark. The cook, standing firm, shouted, "Remember your light. Use it." She could feel it, a glow starting to pulse within her, stronger and more vibrant than the darkness pressing in. We choose our destiny. We will not fade. She stepped forward, holding the rotting meat, a symbol of the past, a reminder of what they had come through. And then, the air thickened again as the shadows surged forward with renewed fury, clawing at their collective light. It felt like fighting a hurricane, content to sweep them away. More screams erupted from the specter, not of fury, but of desperation. You don't understand. You cannot resist what is your truth. With every word, the specter seemed to rally its energy, forcing the shadows to pulse and swell. The group was starting to falter, backs sliding back, the glowing light dimming. No, we can't give in, the cook urged. Channel your pains and fears. Transform them. The woman felt the surge of memories wash over her. The warmth of laughter, the sweetness of love, the familiarity of simple joys. They were fleeting notes in a symphony, urging her to push back. I choose joy. I refuse to let despair win. Around her, Others joined in, letting their voices rise like a tide. I choose strength. I choose love. With each declaration, an unseen force propelled against the suffocating shadows. They forced the grotesque specter back, who twisted in midair, its face contorting into a mask of rage and fear. You will regret this. It screeched, the very walls vibrating with its agony. The shadows trembled and coiled like serpents ready to strike, but the light in the room surged a wave cascading against the dark. The texture of the air changed, new vibrations sending ripples of warmth through their souls. The shadows splintered under the collective will, but just as victory seemed within grasp, a deep, rumbling laughter echoed. I warned you. The specter howled, its tone chilling as it began to transform. The light faltered, revealing an army of silhouettes emerging from the depths behind it, as though it had summoned more darkness. No, we have to hold on. Someone cried, panic tearing through the air. The woman looked back at her friends, gauging their determination amidst the confusion. They were scared, and she could feel it in her bones, the pressure tightening around them like a vice. But she wouldn't let fear take hold. Not now. Fight. We have light. We hold it together. The roar of her voice echoed above the chaos, igniting the dying spark within the group. The light began to flicker violently, responding to their desperation, surging like molten energy. The shadows shrieked as their forms shifted and contorted, but from the center of the light, a new shape began to emerge. A larger figure, glimmering with untamed energy, mingled with the brilliance their unity, giving birth to a new hope, something they had not dared to imagine. Their hope manifested above them, illuminating the room. She gasped. What is that? The shadows writhed in pain, recoiling from the brilliant figure that promised to reshape their reality. But before she could decipher it, she heard the specter's voice rising again, this time more sinister, more resolute. You still don't know what you've unleashed. Just as she turned to warn her friends, the ground beneath them trembled violently, fracturing, refusing to hold their weight. What now? She felt the world shift, tremors, tearing through reality. The sinister laughter echoed again, chilling every bone in her body. Suddenly, a darkness unlike anything they had faced emerged beneath them, yawning wide, a gaping maw of despair ready to swallow them whole. Hold fast. We can't let go, she yelled, but the pull of the chasm sang a song of inevitable surrender. What awaited them at the bottom? Would they find salvation, or was the end only the beginning? The ground buckled like a living creature, shuddering as the darkness grew more powerful, eager to envelop them in its maw. Tendrils of shadow reached out, snaking around their ankles, trapping them in a cold embrace that stung their skin like ice. Panic surged, and she felt her heart hammering violently in her chest, a relentless drumbeat that drowned out everything else. Stay together. The cook's voice thundered, but chaos swirled. Shadows flared and twisted, dark fingers slipping through the chinks in their so-called light. Faces that were once resolute now twisted with fear, eyes wide as they gazed into the abyss below. The woman took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay grounded. Remember the light. Feel it. We can push this back. The words felt hollow but necessary. The spotlight she felt moments ago was dimming under the weight of despair pressing down on them. Help! Came a wail from the corner, where bonds of shadows had ensnared one of their own, a young man, eyes wide in terror. The sight of him, gripped by fear, fueled her resolve like gasoline on flames. Don't let go. Don't let them pull you under, she urged, stepping toward the edge of the growing void. She reached out, straining to grasp his hand. No, don't. Another cried out, his voice urgent and trembling. But the connection was established, her fingers clasped around his, anchoring him to this world. With the smaller figure pulling against the dark, the forced strength ignited a flicker of resilience in the group. She could feel the energy shift, the edges of their light brightening with the collective willpower, though jagged and unsteady, pressing against the creeping shadows. Transform your fear, the cook shouted, having already solidified a tight defensive line. Use it. Each person closed their eyes, focusing inward, their individuality harmonizing into one powerful resonance. The surge of memories rose and twisted like a cyclone, swirling thoughts of laughter, love, and heartache into electric currents of emotion. The collective light pulsed, drawing from a reservoir of strength larger than any one of them, a symphony of unity, drowning out the whispers of doubt. With sheer determination, voices rose again, louder this time, fueled by memories of warmth and safety. I choose life. I choose hope, echoed as hands gripped tight, pulling each other back from the brink. The shadows hissed, dissolving into a muddy swirl around the breach, furious and unrelenting, but the light held firm, battling against the gnashing darkness. It was fierce and bright, a temporary wall against despair, but the specter laughed again, a bone-chilling sound that wrapped around them like chains. Foolish mortals, it shrieked, its features shifting grotesquely as if it were a mirage melting into the night. You do not know the depths of your own souls. The woman felt the invasive rush of doubt creep back, like icy fingers clutching at her spine, but she forced it down. We are not your playthings. We are stronger than you think. The very ground beneath them cracked further, fissures snaking through the stone, revealing a deep, smoldering glow from the darkness below. We have to move. Now. Another cried, panic spilling over as the shadows lurched again, coiling around them like snakes hungry for their next meal. Together, we can push it back. The words poured from her throat now, more of a desperate prayer than a command. But it was enough. With a final surge of strength, they began to shift, together toward the edge, drawing the light with them in one bold push, stepping out from the edge of despair. Sparks of light shot outward as shadows recoiled, shrieking with rage. But as the darkness buckled, something molten and alive surged forward from below, reflecting their fears and aspirations with a new kind of brilliance. What is that? She gasped, fear wrapping around her heart again. Fearless and free, echoed back, melding into another's voice, as their combined screams rang out against the endless night that in that instant, the shadows hesitated, but just as clarity touched the edge of their grasp, a booming roar erupted from the depths below, resonating with a foreboding promise of forbidden knowledge that lingered too close, leaving the air thick with uncertainty. What was rising from the darkness? Would it be the salvation they sought, or the final reckoning? The answer hung in the thick, charged air like a gunshot ready to shatter their fragile moment of hope. The darkness surged. It coiled and twisted, hungry for their fear. The woman felt the walls of despair pressing in, threatening to crush her spirit. But a flicker of light shone brighter, igniting a resolve deep within her. We want to be consumed, she shouted, her voice cutting through the tumult, bold and determined. The flickering around them pulsed with energy. Push! Together! The cook yelled, his hands gripped tightly with those of his friends. They were no longer just diners. They were an army standing against an unrelenting siege. Each heartbeat synchronized, sending waves of bravery through them. Face the dark. Someone cried, his eyes wide but steady. Remember your joys, shouted another, rallying the collective memory of laughter, love, and triumph. Joy burst forth, mingling with their fear, each thought a beacon lighting their path forward. We are alive. We choose to live. United voices rang out, a battle cry woven from their shared experiences. The shadows hesitated for the briefest moment, writhing like something wounded. The specter's laughter faltered, confusion rippling through its form. You think your bond can defy me? It shrieked, but the voices of hope swallowed its venomous words. Together, they roared again, hands raised high, caught a pulse of light brighter than the last. Their own fears, laid bare, became the air they breathed. One by one, they confronted not just personal heartbreaks, but the tangled history of their lives. Embracing the shadows within them somehow drained the malevolent energy swirling around. I feared failure. A man shouted, his voice strong with acceptance. But I seek purpose. I will no longer hide. As he spoke, the darkness that had shackled him released its grip, recoiling in agony. They spoke out, fearlessly confronting every fragment of pain. I feared I'd lose them. The woman confessed, voice raw, but I loved them too much to let that fear consume me. The shadows shivered, their hold loosening as if they could feel the power of her love. The ground quaked, still trembling beneath the monstrous weight of despair, yet now it felt less like falling into an abyss and more like rising from the depths. They pushed harder, arms linked, faces set with determination as the brilliant light grew in the swirling chaos. It enveloped them, radiating warmth and confidence. "Keep going," the cook encouraged, catching the woman's eye. She felt a surge of assurance. "We're healing. We will not be broken." The deeper they forged forward, the more the specter's form twisted, contorted with rage and despair. "This cannot be," it bellowed, but the collective heart of those gathered drowned out its cries, rippling through the fabric of what they had awakened. Then, a brilliant flash erupted from within their intertwining souls, a pure light that defied the shadow's grasp. It swept outward, clawing its way through the darkness, illuminating fractures in its terror. "No!" the specter screamed, its roar shaking the room as the shadows started breaking apart, consumed by the essence of connection and truth. "Speak your light," the cook called. "Let it be your victory." Together, they erupted in a symphony of declarations. "I am more than my mistakes. I am proud of who I am. I am alive. I choose hope." Each statement fortified the radiant force shimmering in triumphant glory. With a final scream that pierced the silence, the darkness shuddered violently as the light cascaded outwards. The shadows had met their match. A unified front of strength and vulnerability could vanquish any fear, could rewrite their fates. Moments stretched into eternity, filling the space with their unyielding resolve. And then, as if the air itself cracked, the shadows imploded in a plume of dark mist, swirling before collapsing in upon themselves. An overwhelming hush followed, thick and heavy, before the flickers of light settled into serenity. No shadows remained, only the quiet aftermath, a deafening relief. Battered but alive, the diners stood together, breathless and exhilarated. Those around the table, though shaken, wore expressions of disbelief and shared triumph. "We did it," the woman murmured, laughter bubbling up from the pit of her stomach. Tears sprung to her eyes, not from pain, but from sheer joy. "Together," the cook echoed, grinning wide. "Together, we faced the darkness." In the wake of their trials, shadows of doubt faded, replaced by the luminous bond they had forged. "We will remember this," she said softly, "and we will keep the darkness at bay." As the clock struck 4, dawn's pale light pierced through the windows, heralding a new beginning. They stepped towards the embrace of morning, hearts full, united by the battles fought and won in the depths of darkness. They looked at one another, faces lit with possibility, no longer just survivors, but champions of life. As they walked out, laughter blaring in the new day, each knew they'd forever carry the light of their truth, undying in the face of any curse. Now, before you go, listen closely. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss out on the next thrilling story. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm monster. Flood the comments section with your thoughts, reactions, and theories about this wild ride. And don't wait even one more second to share this conclusion with at least 5 friends who need a taste of courage and hope. Let us keep this adventure going together.